Thank you.
All right. We've got a few more patterns that we're going to make here. A few more quick and dirty patterns. Okay, so I'm going to create a new board. Again, this is my 12 by 12 pattern making board. You guys remember what the first steps are? Turn off what? Turn off the wood grain. Turn off perspective. Yep, and then create my rectangle to create my floor. And we'll set that to 1/2 inch deep. Good, everybody's awake and paying attention. I appreciate that. Okay, so this one, we're going to create a pretty simple element, but it's an important one as far as the trunk is concerned. It's this C shape. The C is a very traditional carving element. You see them everywhere, and so any pattern set, a decorative pattern set, has to have a C involved with it. So we're going to make one real quick. Okay. This time I'm going to use my grid. So up here in view, I can go down here to toggle grid lines, and I can turn that on. I can in layout go down here to snap and open that up, and this is where I can actually set my grid up, so I can tell it what the spacing of my grid is. So I'm going to change that to 1/2 inch and click OK. And then I've got my snap tools here and I can click that on, and the snap tool allows my points to snap to the points on this grid. So I can very quickly and easily get things lining up without spending a lot of time trying to look at things. They'll just automatically snap into place, and I can make things at the exact size I want and make sure that they're lined up properly, and very quickly and easily do this. So I'm going to draw an arc here, and then I'm going to just draw some more arcs. Actually, let's make this all bigger. So we're making patterns. No reason for us to keep it small. Let's use this board space that we put here. And the arc tool is really nice so that you can get really clean curves very quickly. And let's just keep adding arcs here. And remember, before we went on the break there, I told you we're going to make a C element, a C shape. So that's what we're defining here. It's kind of the outline of it. And you can go through, we've got these constraints, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with them because they probably get in your way sometimes. But you can click on those and you can actually define parameters for it, so you can make sure that all your curves are on your arcs are actually the same radius. Looks like the rest of these look pretty good already. And another thing that especially a lot of new customers, like when you click on that thing and you can't get out of it, you can't click on anything anymore, just hit your escape button and it'll free you from that trap. Okay, so there you can see the C shape there. It's a simple element, but really useful in a lot of decorative carving stuff. So we want to do just a couple quick things to this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sweep around it. We're going to put that kind of bead shape that we put around our rosette. We're going to put that around the whole perimeter of this. Now there's two different kinds of sweeps. There's the rounded ones and then a sweep corner. So if you want to have sharp corners or rounded corners on what you're sweeping, that will determine which one you want to use. Since this is a very rounded shape, I'm going to use that sweep rounded. And zoom in on my profile window. All right, and again, we see this. We've got our green, and then right here in the middle is our red.
How did you bring that profile?
I brought that profile window by clicking on my sweep tool. And the sweep tool, we're still using the pattern modeling tools here. So that sweep, and this is the same tool that we used in the last pattern to put that beaded rim around the outside of our rosette. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. I'm just going to put an arc there. And just line it up on my white line and then hit OK and let it sweep the perimeter of that. Now I'm going to double click on it and it's going to open up again because I want to make it bigger. And I also need to set the depth on this thing. So clicking on this, the right or one of these red points here, I can right click. It brings up this menu. I've got these things on the top called attach and remove vertex, these types of things. These are part of the basic package set, these types of things, but they help you position things exactly. So I can attach this to any of the lines or edges of the board, and I'm going to set that to 0.5 because that's what our floor of the pattern is. So I'm going to define that depth there, make sure it's as far down as we need it to be. Then we'll click OK again. Okay, so now we've got a much nicer little bead around there, and it's not standing so tall. It's coming right out of the surface there.
Joe,
Yeah.
we had a question back here. Someone asked, why didn't we mirror that, just that one side over? If I'm correct, you cannot join a mirror.
Yeah, so a parent-child relationship cannot become fused, kind of. They're separate elements, and one is a dependent of the other. So in order for us to apply any of these modeling tools, they have to be one closed shape. So all those lines have to be connected together into one shape.
And a mirror wouldn't close it.
A mirror wouldn't close it. They'd be two separate elements.
Now,
And,
I was looking at how to do it.
well, that's why we're using that grid and the snap, because then we can quickly get it exactly the same on both sides without having a lot of labor involved.
And that's why you could go into these constraints and stuff to make sure both sides match, etc. Right?
Yeah, but with that grid,
It's doing the same thing.
yeah, we've got it nailed dead on. It's perfectly symmetrical. Yep. Okay, so we're going to take this arc here, this arc element, and I'm just going to copy and paste it. And copy and paste, you can right click to get to your copy and paste, or you can use the shortcut keys that a lot of us like to use, where you hold down the control button and hit C for copy, and then hold down the control button and hit V at the same time for pasting. So now we've got two of them. Our first one that we created here, and then this one here, which we want to clear off the sweep. We don't need that sweep anymore, so that's free of any decoration. And this time we're going to puff that same shape. So I'm just going to put a bubble puff on there with our parameter, our depth of 5 or half an inch, and we'll hit OK. And now we've got this puffed shape in between our little beaded element. Now that's a little tall, so we'll go in our height and kind of push that back. I'll set it down to maybe 50 here. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one. And just to avoid confusion, let's go over here to our carving list and let's rename those elements so that we don't get confused which one we're working with. So I'm going to call this one, for the outside edge, I'll call it bead, and hit enter. And for the middle one here, let's call it puff. And that way I know which one I'm working with. So let's set the height down to 50 for that puff, and let's turn the grid off so we can see this better.
Can't you turn it off with your app up there? Menu?
Which menu?
Right beside it, your pull down, that will turn it off. Oh.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's in the toolbar here, but right next to your texture, but it's not in this setup.
The one on the right, isn't that?
No, that one's snap to edge.
I thought, oh.
And that one's the snap to grid, and then this one's toggle texture, which turns the wood grain on.
Turns it on wrong.
Yeah, I have on my computer too. It has the grid on and off right there in the menu. This is Dave's computer, so who knows why or how he set his up. So, and that's all we're going to do. We've created our C pattern, and just two quick maneuvers there, two tools and one drawing, and we've got a really nice little element that we're going to use a lot in these carvings. Yes, Michael?
Joe, in the profile window, you had a red, white, and green line. Did you explain what's the red, green line?
I did. Did you guys?
You were talking.
Okay. Well, when we're in that profile drawing window, I'm grabbing the wrong one. We've got the green, the red, and the white. You guys remember what those are? Yeah, so on this one up here, they're showing you the green, the white, and then the red in the middle here. So it's showing you which side of the line you're going to be working on, and it's also showing you how big you can go with it. So I could stretch this all the way to those red and green lines, or even beyond. But once you get beyond the red and green, it's going to start cutting things off. Now, the green is actually a parameter that says this is as big as you can get if you want to stay on this board. So that's why the green can sometimes be so far out there, because it's giving you that space. It's like, well, if you want to, you can sweep this all the way to the edges of the board, and it might end up looking funny, but I'm sure there are reasons to do that at some point. So that's what those parameters give you. It helps you know where you're at on the other board when you're working with those. Okay, so now we've got this. Let's grab our two elements. Let's put them in a group. Take that group, make pattern. And we've got another pattern for our pattern set for our project here. All right, let's do one more pattern, and we're gonna do kind of a quick version of it because the next pattern we're gonna do is actually kind of complex. Okay, so let's do another new project here. Actually, no, not a new project. We're going to go to File, Import Tracing Image. Okay, now Import Tracing Image is part of the 2D drawing suite. And the 2D drawing suite allows you to do some really interesting things as far as drawing goes. And this is one of the key elements to it, being able to trace. So I'm going to go to Import Tracing Image from File and find there's my shell for tracing. Okay, so remember that catalog that we were passing around there, the ornamental supply? I found a pattern that I really liked in there, and I wanted to borrow some elements from it. So I scanned it in, and I'm going to use that as some of my elements. Now this is a little grainy, and it was a tiny little piece displayed in there, so I recommend maybe finding a little bit better image, unless you like to torture yourself. But this one will work too. Like I had no problem tracing it. It just can get a little hairy when you can't see every element properly. So I'll show you how we make this work. What are the first steps here? I've got it imported in. It's on my board now. So instead of wood grain, I've got this thing that I can trace. Use my drawing tools to trace. And we need to set this up for carving. So what are my first steps?
Turn off perspective.
Turn off perspective.
Set your depth.
And then we'll define our
Floor.
floor. All right. And we'll set that floor to be 1/2 inch. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to be using some of the tools here in the drawing suite. I'm going to be using my Smart Spline tool, and I talked about that just briefly before. But with the Smart Spline tool, you know, up here in the regular basic drawing tools, I've got splines and I've got lines, and I can draw with either of those, and I can, you know, change tools. I have to go pick one, and then if I want a line, I have to go change the tool, go pick the other one. The Smart Spline tool allows you to make those changes without having to change the tool. So I can put a point down here, and I can pull out a curve. So I put that next point down, and then with the mouse still held, I pulled down, and it pulls out these control points, which allow me to define that curve however I want. I can just position it, and then it's still connected there, so I can continue on. Now the next point here, because this was purple, purple means tangent. That means that these two elements are going to be connected as a spline, so it's going to follow the control point that I defined for the last one. So if I put a point down here, it's going to continue that curve around for me, and then put a point. End tool. I can manipulate these together because they are tangent. Does everybody, so you guys get that? You understand what I mean by tangent there? Okay.
Is that still with that 3D software? Or?
No, this is part of the 2D set. So the tracing image and this drawing tool, this is part of the 2D drawing, the drawing suite. Okay, so let's continue on here. Now this red point here means it's free, means it's not tangent. So when I put a point down, the next point down, it's not going to be connected in any way to the curve before. And so that means it's also undefined. So I can make it a line, so it's got no curve to it, or I can make it a curve. By pulling that control point out again. And then I can make some adjustments there. Well, another thing that we can do here is, so this element, this dot here is purple, which means it's tangent. So I can right click on it and I can come up here to my menu where I've got an intersect, and then I've got the options of free or tangent. So I can redefine that and turn it to a red dot and take away that tangency. And then I can draw off of that. And let's just...
Joe, if it's symmetrical, can you mirror it?
I can't mirror it because I'm creating a closed shape here. So it is symmetrical, but this is, being a carving, it's going to be a lot more organic. We can have some variance in the details here that it won't affect the overall look of what we're trying to do. So there we go. We've got this part of this shell traced. And we'll go through and just tweak it. So we've got all these control elements, these control bars that we can adjust those curves, and we've got our tracing image right there, so we can just line up our lines. And that's all we got to do. So it's pretty simple. So when you feel like you've got it well defined, let's go and add a puff to it. And just like we did on the petals of those leaves, we're going to do the same thing on this. I'm going to use my curve, and I can toggle my texture on and off, so I can use that texture button. The same thing that turns your wood grain on and off, you can use to turn the tracing image on and off, so you can see your elements better. And so we see that looks like this, but our tracing image, these things are inverted. They're going down. So we're going to use that invert button again, just like we did on those petals, and invert that to get that kind of scalloped shell there. So we're using a little bit more sophisticated line because we're tracing out this shape, but it's the exact same thing we did to make that rose, the rosette in the beginning there. Same function, same design, just a little different configuration. So let me quickly draw out the rest of these, and I'll show you why I love this tool, why this tool is important. Is because you can very quickly define these shapes out. And I'm going to go ahead and draw all of them first. And then we can select all of them together and do the puff all at one time rather than each one individually. And we're also going to make use of that mirror, because for the rest of these elements, they can just be mirrored across. And so, you know, you're noticing as I'm drawing this, some of my curves are going wild and stuff, but it's not bothering me because I can just go and grab those control points and pull everything back together and just line it up on these lines. And down here, I know that I have another shell element that's going to be in front of the base of this shell. So I'm not even worried about what the bottom of this shell looks like. I could go through and make it clean and straight if I wanted to use this shell individually. So that's depending on how you want to use it, you can make those adjustments. I'm going to make that
You make it so easy, and I have to type those lines sometimes. Like they're known lines.
yeah, they can get a little tricky, but it just a little bit of practice, and you get the hang of it here.
Yes.
All right, one more, and then we'll start modeling.
And it's just practice to figure out where to get your little, how you move it as you go, get another red dot on the screen.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of practice, but it's by far the easiest way to trace things without having to, you don't have to go and change tools all the time. You can really draw with this thing. And most of it's just the tweaking. You've got the ability to come and just tweak those curves. So
But you can grab the red dot and move it, can't you?
yeah, you can grab any of the dots and move them around.
What if at this point you figured out you needed another red dot, can you drop one in there?
Yep, so I can go on any of these lines right here, and I can right click and go to insert vertex and add another dot in there. At any of these dots in here, I can right click on them and I can go and change them to be tangent or free. So I can change them to be the purple or red dot. I can go to any of the line elements here. So I've got this spline here. I can go to form and I can make it an arc. I can make it a straight line. I can make it, it already is a spline. So you can change the form of any segment of line in there. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. So this, I got this loop at the bottom of this. Let's go to change form and let's make it a line. And let's turn off that tangency, make that free. And then I'll bring that curve back to where it was. And so I've eliminated that loop there just by just redefining how that line was being called. Okay, so let's select all those that we just drew there, and we're going to do the same puff that we did on that first one, the curve, the 1/2 inch, and then we're going to invert it, and then we're going to mirror this across horizontally, and there's the invert. We'll turn that off and we'll take a look at it. And we've got our shell. And from here, we'll make some other adjustments. And at this point, we don't even need to look at the tracing because we've got our pattern, and we can adjust it however we want to, because now it's ours. Okay, a pretty good looking shell.
Yeah. You can do this for a living.
So the tracing image gives you a lot of really cool capabilities. And last year, when I was doing the tracing image, I traced a fighter jet from an image I found on the internet, and I got a tutorial of that on the website. There's a video of how to do that. So the really cool things that you can do with this tracing image and those 2D drawing tools that open up your pattern making capabilities greatly. Yep.
As part of this, let's say you wanted that smooth at the bottom. Could you put a circle on there and then use your cut tool to smooth that out at the bottom instead of being rough like that?
Yeah, you could do some different.
Over the top, or not a circle, but an arc over the top of it.
Yeah, you could. Probably the easiest way to do it would just be, excuse me, go and clean up your lines. So I could adjust these.
I just thought that would be quicker to make it an arc.
An arc and then cut it, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that I'm going to make this into a pattern, and so those elements in the pattern would be there.
Oh, okay.
And another thing I could do, which is a possibility, is that once this is a pattern and I've made it myself, if you have Pattern Editor, the Scanning Pro software, I can double click on that in my pattern library and open these up to be able to edit them
Oh, okay.
with the Pattern Editor.
And then you could basically do what you just asked.
Yeah, and then in there you can just use like the eraser tools and go through and clean up those edges and stuff. All right. Well, I think you guys get the idea. I don't want to go through the whole tracing of this because this whole thing it would take the rest of the day for me to explain it. I could just do it and you guys could watch me, but if I had to talk through it, it would take a while.
So, just in general, now that you're very good at that, when you were going to do this on your own and you weren't going to walk us through it, how long would it take you to do this?
This took me to do all of like these elements here. It took me a little while. It wasn't terribly long. So I can give you a quick synopsis here. Remember how we did that C, where we just used the arcs and defined out the curves? That's exactly how you're going to do this filigree. You're going to just use the arc tool, define out some curves, use your spline tool, and then this is exactly the same as that C, where you sweep the bead around it, puff out the middle, and then you've got these circle elements here that you just go through and add a bubble puff onto those, and you can very quickly define out even something very scrolly and what looks like to be very complex and detailed. When you break it down to just those individual parts of it and use the same techniques that I used for those first two patterns that we walked through, we'll use those exact same techniques to do all the rest of this. And I'll show you, here is that pattern that I traced. The overall pattern when it was done. So there's the whole thing, all drawn out in this same technique that I just showed you of that whole trace pattern. Do you guys feel like you can do that now? It looks
The answer to that is no.
Well, it looks complex when it's done, but when you break it down to those individual pieces like that, it's very simple.
Well, I'm not being rude at all. This is new to me, so I feel like I've been well introduced to it. Could I duplicate it? I don't know. Maybe. I think what would happen is I would try to get confused and never work with it.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of practice is always the best way.
Buy, or is that included with the 2.0 or?
No, that's the separate module still.
So
The 2D drawing there.
Do you need to buy 2D before you buy 3D, or you have to buy them both?
No,
If you buy
no.
3D, you've got everything.
Yeah, we didn't even use any of the 2D for those first models that we made today. That was just using the 3D and the basic drawing tools that come with the basic
If you have
stuff.
3D, you don't need 2D.
Not necessarily. Like they if you want to do tracing, like what I just did here, that is all part of the 2D suite. So the tracing and this drawing tool that I use to do the tracing, that's part of the 2D suite there. So, but the modeling tools are, I showed how we did freehand modeling, no tracing at all. We just were defining shapes and we didn't need any of the 2D tools to do any of that.
Yeah.
That looks pretty neat. Define 3D like that.
Very defined for something.